Welcome to Vegan Business Talk with Katrina Fox, author of Vegan Ventures, Start and Grow an Ethical Business. Hello and welcome to episode 79 of Vegan Business Talk. I'm Katrina Fox, journalist, author, media and PR coach, copywriter, editor and proofreader, and founder of Vegan Business Media, a content, events and training platform providing success tips for vegan business owners and entrepreneurs. In this episode, I interview Robbie Lockie from Plant-Based News, a content platform and creative agency in London, UK. Robbie was born in Zimbabwe, Africa, where he started his career in digital design in 1999. He then came to London a year later to further his career in design, media and communications. He's worked with several large brands including BMW UK, Mercedes-Benz, Microsoft, the Royal Navy, Jamie Oliver and Getty Images. In 2016, he co-produced a short documentary, Swine, for UK animal charity Viva, and has been involved in a number of online campaigns, including Move Your Money, a charity helping to raise awareness around ethical banking. Robbie co-founded Plant-Based News, aka PBN, with Klaus Mitchell in 2017 to act as a global platform for change. Operating for 2 years previously as a YouTube channel, the brand has experienced fast growth, currently reaching 3 to 5 million people a week via the website and its social media channels. PBN Creative is the agency arm that helps ethical brands with a range of digital services, including web design, branding, and promotional videos. This included managing the website infrastructure rebuild and relaunch for Veganuary. In this interview, Robbie discusses the 3 questions you need to ask yourself before creating a piece of content for your vegan business, what to do if you put your content out on social media and it doesn't get engagement, how to grab a viewer's attention with a video in the first 3 seconds, the pros and cons of a video marketing strategy PBN uses that involves rebranding and sharing other people's content, how a new cross-posting feature on Facebook can benefit brands who agree to collaborate, PBN's point of difference and how it managed to enter and stand out in a crowded marketplace, what to take into account when paying online platforms to produce branded content for you, and much more. Here's the interview with Robbie Lockie of Plant-Based News. Hello, Robbie. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Hello, Katrina. Lovely to talk.
I'm very excited about interviewing you because I've been so impressed by the rise of Plant-Based News. You've really kind of come onto the scene as a really strong, powerful media platform around vegan and plant-based news, and getting lots and lots of views and eyes on your posts and everything. So we'll dig a bit into that as we go along. But the first question I ask everyone is their why. Now, I know you've got a really strong background in advertising, and you've worked for some really high-end agencies and brands, and now you're focused on plant-based news, which has got some different branches to it. So tell us a little bit, first of all, how and why did plant-based news come about, and what are your reasons for doing it?
Sure. So I've been working in design, digital design, content strategy, things like that for almost about 18 years now. I'm born in Zimbabwe in Africa, and I came to the UK when I was around 18, and I've always had a passion for the internet, really, since I was very, very young. I've been using it probably since I was like 15, 16, so that's a long time. I'm 38 years old now, so I'll let the audience do the mathematics on that. But I've always had a passion for it because I've always felt that, this tool is an incredible way of connecting people and getting information out there instantly. So I've been working in the agency world, working for advertising and media companies for most of my professional career. And then about 2 years ago, actually, no, that's incorrect. About 5 years ago, I decided I wanted to do more ethical work. So more work around social change, charities, public bodies, things like that. I got involved in an organization, a charity called Love 146, which is abolition of child slavery. And from there, I kind of started doing more and more work around charities and social change. Then I went vegan, and just everything changed for me then, really. My passion for campaigning and activism really just sort of exploded. And I realized that, using my skills as a communicator, as a designer, as a kind of editor, that I could, educate and transform people's views and opinions and paradigms really when it came to, the vegan message.
Wonderful.
So I was running a business called Love Rita Studios, which was my own kind of mini agency where I created content and did websites and did videos and things like that. And I just realized that I needed something else. I wanted to be part of a team. Klaus Mitchell, who's my very good friend and business partner, about a year and a half ago, approached me and said, do you want to help out with a Facebook page? And around the time that Klaus approached me, I think we had sort of maybe 3,000, 4,000 likes. And I just sort of jumped on board, and, I've been using Facebook since the beginning. I know it inside out, back to front. I know all the tricks and all the sort of stuff. And I just sort of put a lot of energy into building the page. And I think as of this week, we've got 104,000 likes, which, it's been amazing just to see it grow. And then, I built us a website where we could put articles, and we started getting approached by people from all over the world to write content and articles. And it's just sort of grown up and become a sort of, a real established space where we can communicate the vegan message, the ethical message, the environmental message, the health message. So that's where you'll see we've divided the offerings, or I call them content verticals, into 3 areas. So it's PBN health, which is sort of personal health, then PBN environment, which is sustainability, information about environmental catastrophes, destruction, things like that, and obviously positive stories too. And then obviously PBN activism and ethics, which is proving quite popular. So it's all the kind of videos about vegan activism, animal welfare, and things like that. So.
Yeah. I noticed you'd branched out to and even created separate Facebook pages for those 3 threads as well.
Yeah, so we'll have those conversations.
You're making work for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. We just felt like channeling everything into one page might not necessarily the best way to do it, because obviously, the message we're communicating is quite broad. And also, our strategy is to sort of break out of the vegan bubble. The vegan bubble can sometimes contain people who make vegan content for vegans. And what can happen is that you have a bunch of what they say nodding dogs, where everyone kind of just nods and agrees with you. And really what we want to do is we want to attract non-vegans. We want to attract the people who are the, vegan curious, and even the meat eaters who are environmentally conscious. And we can talk a bit more about why that is later, if you like.
Cool. Fantastic. No, I love that. And you're right. It's great to be creating stuff for vegans, but you really want to be reaching out to the mainstream and getting them interested. So I love the way you've taken different creative ways and strands of doing that to entice people who otherwise may be scared or turned off by kind of full on vegan messages. But that's great. So what were some of your challenges when you started up? It sounds like obviously having a handle on Facebook is a major advantage, but what were some of your challenges involved when starting up PBN?
The challenges, I guess, is kind of managing all the content. There's so much great stuff out there, and it's just knowing what to share, when to share it. That's always been a challenge, because obviously, dealing with a global audience, it's quite hard to decide when to share things. And also, when you create a piece of content, you never really know how well it's going to do. And it sometimes can feel a bit overwhelming, because you think, I spend all this energy and time on something, and then you put it out there and nobody clicks on it, and you think, has anyone actually seen it? Even if we have 100,000 likes on our Facebook page, maybe only 10% of those people will see that content, because that's the way, unfortunately, they call it the pay-to-play social network, which is what Facebook is. But there are a few things that we, that seem to work. But it's just refining it, and also being, aware of what everyone else is doing and looking at what content does work. So a lot of the challenges are mostly to do with time. At the time when we first started, I had a full-time job, and it was very difficult to sort of try and juggle everything. So.
Yes, I can imagine, especially putting out the amount of content that you do. And I think that's something that a lot of vegan business owners do find challenging, particularly when they're bootstrapping, is getting themselves seen and heard amongst the crowd. And obviously content marketing is an important way to achieve that. And I think you've done a really, really great job of getting your content viewed and shared. And I know that some of your posts, you've got hundreds or, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of views on some of them, especially on Facebook. So are there any tips that you can offer vegan business owners on how to get more views, more likes and more shares on their content?
I think there's a few things that need to happen. Is that when you create a piece of content, you have to ask yourself the question, how will I entertain? How will I amuse? How will I inform? And, if your content goes out and it doesn't do well, pull it down and rethink it. That's what we try to do. We don't do it with everything, but we try to sort of employ that approach as much as possible, because we think that if something isn't engaging and interesting and captivating, then it's either boring or it's too long or it doesn't really hit the mark. Now, with Facebook specifically, you have to think about kind of user behavior and psychology. So when a person is on the app, on the Facebook app on their phone, which is where most people will be probably browsing Facebook, they're scrolling down the news feed and they will pass your video and they'll pass your piece of content. You literally have less than 1 second to grab that person's attention. In fact, the videos in the first 3 seconds is really where you'll get someone. And that's why some of our videos, you'll see these square videos with the big captions across the top and the bottom.
Yeah.
So that's what we use, kind of simple, bold statements to kind of grab a person's attention. Because I think, humans are creatures of the eye, unless obviously you're visually impaired. You're captured by what you see. And if it's kind of interesting or familiar, someone will stop on the newsfeed, click on the video, and then start to watch it or click through to the link. So always try and make sure that your titles and your captions and everything are really thought out. Don't rush things. Don't kind of just stick anything up. Spend some time thinking about it. Look at what your competition are doing. Look at what other people in a similar vertical to you are doing. Don't necessarily copy them, but try and sort of imitate the formula in the way that they communicate.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice, actually. And you've mentioned video, and obviously that is becoming, incredibly popular. And you're right, particularly because I think Facebook has autoplay automatically enabled unless you manually take it away. And I know I get stuck in, I'll scroll through and see a bundle of baby kittens or something, and I'll tend to stop and just go, oh, isn't that lovely, and watch it. So, I think we could all be drawn into that. Now, with video marketing, I noticed with one of your strategies, which I'm curious about, is that you often take or use other people's content, and then you sort of put plant-based news at the top at the bottom, and you usually attribute the original maker of the video. So how does that work? Are there certain videos that you can just do that with, or do you have to collaborate with the person and get permission? How does that kind of work?
It's a real grey area. I mean, on social media, because it's somebody else's platform that you're pushing on, and because of the sheer volume of content, often it's quite difficult to police copyright. And a lot of people build huge audiences from sharing other people's content. And for the most part, unofficially, you probably can get away with it. Officially and legally, obviously, sharing other people's content without permission or specifically copyright content, you can be penalized. And we have learnt the hard way of sometimes sharing a creative video from another page, and they have issued a copyright strike. Obviously, you can write a counter message to them. You can apologize. You can request it be removed. Things like that. And a lot of companies don't mind removing it because they understand that people just want to share their content, and most people are more than prepared to explain that their policy is not to allow they call it native sharing into a person's timeline. Now there are sorts of grey areas around editorial content. So if we're a news platform, so we're reporting on something. So there's a sort of fair use policy around talking about a topic, so we can clip in bits of video. But yeah, it's a real grey area. It's a difficult one, really. I mean, what we do try to do is attribute and link to anyone that we share. And a lot of the time we do ask for permission, and people say absolutely fine, because we're promoting what they're doing, really.
Yeah,
so
exactly. I was going to ask that. There seems to be, what the benefits are. There's obviously, I guess, a benefit to you in that you don't have to continually create original content, and also the person who created it may well get a lot more views, like way more views than they might on their own platform. So how does that work in terms of the views, Robbie? So when you do that strategy, and then it gets lots of views, are they shared, or are they mainly plant-based and it's like attributed to PBN or whoever does it? I've seen other people do the strategy as well. How does that kind of work?
So if you download a video of somebody else's, make a copy of that file and re-upload it into your page, whether that's YouTube or Facebook. Specifically on Facebook, obviously, those views are only for that your copy of the video, not the person you have copied it from. However, there's a new function called Facebook cross-posting, whereas if you have a relationship with another page, what they can do is they can enable you as a cross-posting partner. If they give you permission to use a video piece of content, and they can enable you as a cross-posted video partner, and then that video then becomes available to you on your Facebook page, where you can then push it to your page with your own caption, etc., etc. Obviously, including a link to the page that's created it, which is what most people do, and then both pages will share the views and the analytics. So so it allows kind of pages who partner, and it really relies on both pages to promote the content to their audience. If one's got a much bigger audience, and obviously naturally the larger number of views will come from the larger page. But it's difficult to say because it's so unpredictable. Because if the smaller page happens to have one influencer on it who has a huge following, that one influencer could then share it to their X million, like page, and then it could just exponentially grow. So you never know. That's the amazing thing about social media. You never know who sees your piece of content and how big their following might be.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. How important is paid reach, particularly on Facebook? Like you touched on this earlier about it being pay to play. I mean, PBN certainly gets lots of likes and views on there. And I know you've obviously got lots of followers, but I'm just wondering, like, is it a strategy that you use, or are you finding that now that you're becoming quite well known that you're getting more organic likes?
We get all our stuff's organic. Like, we don't really pay for anything. I think we've paid for maybe one or two things in all the time that we've worked on this project, only just as an experiment. Page reach is interesting. Like, on our best days, we reach on our best days, we've reached about 6.5 million people a week.
Wow.
And all that reach means is that someone has seen a piece of content that you produce. Doesn't necessarily mean they've engaged. Doesn't necessarily mean they've engaged with it, if that makes sense. It means that they've seen it. So, for example, if they've scrolled past a video, that doesn't necessarily mean they've actually stopped and watched the whole video. And that's the tricky thing with Facebook, because a video view only means 3 seconds. So if a person's scrolled past and stopped for 3 seconds and then keeps going, that's counted as a view.
Okay, right. That's a bit...
Facebook's very, very kind of, I don't want to say underhanded, but they obviously skew the numbers that you see as a user and a customer to sort of their advantage, if that makes sense.
Got it. Yeah, for sure. Now, thank you for sharing that. I've been curious about that because I've seen a few people do it. So it was, it's interesting. So we're in the midst of a plant-based vegan revolution. So we've got a lot more players in the arena. We've got ethical vegan brands, and we've also got some non-vegan run businesses, including some really large brands that are sort of, I guess, cashing in on the trend. So I'm curious, what advice would you have for vegan businesses on how to stand out both within and outside of the, among other vegan businesses, and also attracting and mainstream customers?
For me, when I always say to people as a marketeer, be bold, be brave, and don't imitate people. Be innovative. Like, look at what your competition are doing, and obviously, try and mirror the sort of the things that are working. But I think, when it comes to sort of selling yourself or your product, it really needs to, your passion and your love for what you're doing really needs to come through. Because, and that needs to come across the entire package, whether that's like the way your products are kind of, bottled up or packaged up, to your branding, to your social media, to the way you talk about your product. Everything really needs to sort of burst with that passion and it really needs to shine, because I think a lot of the time people are very good at one thing within their business. They're good at making something, but then the marketing and all of that and the packaging often lets them down. You can have the most amazing product in the world, but if it's packaged badly and branded badly, and it's not sort of like, people don't really understand what it is, it's not going to sell. Yeah. But then, then also on the other side of that, sometimes, you get a product that is so good, it tastes so good, that word of mouth is powerful enough to carry the product and the business, and it just keeps going. Or in another scenario, it's the only product in its space. For example, so like a vegan meat product, say, might be the only one in its space, and so there are no alternatives, but it happens to taste great. So obviously everybody shares it and talks about it because it's the only thing that's there. And then obviously more people can then come to the space offering a more strategic approach with regards to like branding or marketing, and then you could potentially easily be knocked off your pedestal, if that makes sense.
Exactly, yeah, which I think we've probably seen over the years, because people are you're no longer the only vegan cheese or the only vegan meat. So
you have to up your game.
Yes, exactly. So in terms of, I'm curious, what do you think is the difference between plant-based news? Because obviously there's some, big vegan media platforms that have been around for some time, and then you've managed to come into this space. What do you think makes you stand out and has made your content popular?
I think most of the big vegan ones that are out there at the moment tend to focus just on written content. So Klaus and I very much, our energy and our focus is on video content and storytelling, and making it feel more personal. That is the idea, really. And I think that's the main point. Plant-based news obviously started on YouTube 2 years ago. Klaus started, the YouTube channel, and he built it up around the idea of a collaborative approach. So he had people from all over the world kind of acting as correspondents, reporting on news in the local area or kind of globally. So, I mean, it had a more personal feel to it, and obviously a bit more kind of young, hip. I hate to say sort of hip and trendy, but it feels more fun and youthful. Like everything we designed, we wanted to look beautiful. We wanted to look really kind of like sexy and kind of engaging. So.
Got it. Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. It's interesting because I know people are interested, maybe starting a blog or a YouTube channel. So it's good for them to hear these kind of things about how to, as you say, you sort of stand out among the rest.
Yeah, pick one thing and focus on it. I think our kind of strength is video, and that's where we put all our energy, I think.
Yeah, cool. No, fantastic. Now, you mentioned you've come from an advertising background. You work in the creative side, but you've worked for the ad agencies. So what are your thoughts now on paid ads in, say, traditional media, or sponsored content? They keep changing the names, native advertising or branded content, sponsored content. Is it worth it? And if so, how and why?
Do you mean sponsored content in printed media?
In other media, yeah, particularly in printed media, but also potentially in online media as well. So, like sometimes you see at the end of an article at The Guardian or wherever it is, recommended by, and it's actually sponsored content. So, brands have paid but it looks like a piece of editorial, but it's actually been paid for. What are your thoughts around that?
Sort of just regarding printed media first, I mean, we've tried a lot, and I've tried personally a lot over the years to use printed media. And the reason I don't necessarily like it is because you can't measure it. You can't measure how many people have engaged unless you use kind of coupon codes and things like that. I'm not a massive fan. I'm a digital person myself, and I like the digital aspect because you can measure it. Now, when it comes to sort of advertorial type content, paid for inclusion, things like that, I love it because I think that what you can do is you can create a piece of content that is branded, but then it's also kind of fits to your audience. And I think that's my piece of advice really, is that if you create a piece of content that you want to place on a platform, someone's platform, then you need to make sure that you give the platform kind of the power to be able to craft that piece of content so that it fits within the narrative of their normal kind of broadcast. Because if we're broadcasting, 24/7 talking about fluffy bunnies, and then suddenly like an ad pops up talking about like, I don't know, scary monkeys or something, it's totally off brand or off the story. And I think the audience doesn't want to kind of feel, have something that pop up that's kind of jarring. It needs to sort of feel natural. Not saying we want to kind of like manipulate our audience, but we want to make sure that the experience is continuous. And I think if you slot in a piece of paid for advertising, it needs to feel like the rest of the conversation for the brand, for the platform you're kind of placing your ad in.
Got it. So it's got its place alongside what we call earned media, which is what I help people with, to actually get kind of free publicity. But you also think that branded content, particularly in the digital space, is worthwhile.
Yeah, I think for, like I say, hand over responsibility to the platform and ask them what works for their audience, rather than being really prescriptive and being very specific about what you want your ad to look like and what you want the story to be written by. There's I'll give you an example. So there's in London, there's a vegan kebab store who've done really, really well. And they're great, and they've asked us to create a piece of branded content. And instead of us kind of just writing a story about them, what we've done is we want to write a piece of content that talks about like the benefits of having a vegan doner kebab over a meat one, and the kind of the ethical and environmental savings you make by making that switch. So it's not just a kind of boring advert, but it's also an interesting piece about the product and the benefits behind it.
Right. Which we're seeing quite a lot of. I know, like sometimes brands like tissue brands, for example, they make nice little stories, and you watch it and you've no idea until the end that it's actually made by a brand. They can make a nice little short story and movie, and you think, oh, that's so lovely, it's really heartwarming, and at the end it's like, made by, a name of a big tissue company or something. So
yeah. So, and it all creates brand recall, doesn't it? Because I think when you have an emotional connection to something, you're much more likely to remember it.
For sure. Now, talking of that, and so you mentioned that you actually work with brands. So as well as creating this content for people, obviously you've also got a branch of PBN called PBN Creative, where you do actually work and create content for other brands. So tell us a little bit about that and the kinds of services you offer and how that works for particularly small business who are just starting out.
Yeah, so the idea with PBN Creative is that will be a kind of vertical within PBN Limited to kind of fund what we do, and what we'll offer and what we do offer within that is kind of video services, video editing. So all the stuff that you see on PBN, kind of whether it's like articles or content writing or copywriting, microsites, things like that, we can build and create that stuff fairly quickly at a reasonable cost, because we're not like a big company, so we've got small teams who we can produce things that look good quite quickly.
Got it. Now, so how do you decide then whether to run a story, which is obviously like just editorial, and obviously a brand would, get kind of free benefit from that, and how do you decide between that and perhaps approaching a brand to say, right, let's do some branded content where you pay us, and then they get to, I guess, use that content how they want? Is that how it works? I'm just kind of curious about how you decide what to include as editorial versus branded content.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think this is one we ask ourselves all the time. I mean, we ask. So when a company approaches us and says, "Can you write about us?" we say, "Well, we'd love to." PBN is we're a functioning business now, so we charge an inclusion fee for kind of advertorial type content. If the brand says no, or we can't afford it or whatever, then we work with them to kind of create something at least that kind of tells their story. So we always sort of test the waters really and suggest that we'd like to do an advertorial piece, because an advertorial piece, a paid for piece, allows us to spend a lot more time. We could do more research, we could make graphics, we could do video, we could do all kinds of interesting things to make the piece of content more shareable. Because I think, our articles, we don't spend hours and hours and hours on them. They are often kind of, a couple of hours work. So we don't necessarily, if we did an editorial piece about a product or service or company, it would just be very short and brief. Yeah,
got it. Okay. So they get something more in depth if it's branded content. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
No, this is good to know. It's good to know. So what would you say are some of the key things that vegan business owners make when they're, particularly in the beginning, when they're starting out, and what should they do instead?
So could you ask that question again?
So with vegan business owners that are starting out, I'm curious as to what you think some of the mistakes they make in the beginning. And what they should do instead.
I think it goes for all businesses. I think sometimes when people start, they try and do everything, and when customers sort of come to the company or the business, people get a bit confused as to what it is the company's offering. I think that's what I said a bit before, is like find one thing and do it really, really well, and then branch out from there. We've kind of employed that tactic where we built up our main Facebook page to 100,000, and then we've branched out into other areas. And I think that's the best advice I could give, I guess, is to create a solid foundation, create a solid audience base first, and then expand from there. And don't try and kind of do everything at once, because if you're just starting out, bootstrapping your startup, you're only going to have limited money and time and energy and stuff. So simplify and do it really well.
Yeah, that's very good advice. And I was going to ask you about that because, like, you seem very savvy in, all the kind of tool, you've been working in the digital world for some time. So when people are starting out, and that's great advice about what to focus on first, particularly in terms of creating their content. So we've got, social media, there's PR, there's AdWords, there's a whole heap of apps and technology, and it's all changing, and it can be quite overwhelming for vegan business owners. Yeah. So in terms of, like, what should they start on first? Like, do they get their website in place first, and do they then, like, maybe get social in? And when do they kind of, I guess, I often get asked people, what do I start with? Because like you just said, trying to do everything all at once can be quite overwhelming. So what do you recommend people start with? Should they, like, is the website the first thing that they should get, and then maybe add a shopping cart and social? Like, how does it work, and in what order do you recommend?
Before anything is done, I recommend people do what's called a business canvas. Have you heard of this?
No, I don't think. Is
so
it the same as a business plan, or that's different?
It's a bit like a business plan, but it's a visual tool that you stick on the wall and use Post-its, and you create columns. And essentially, what you do is you create all these columns which talk about, like, who are your suppliers, who are your customers, what are your marketing channels, where's your income coming from. And it is like a business plan, but it's done in a way where you can kind of use Post-it notes and stick them on this kind of this grid and decide on how everything kind of works. And I think that is one of the sort of problems that a lot of business people start off with when they begin, is that they don't make a solid plan and they don't think through where they're going and how they're going to get there. They kind of just start. And I mean, sometimes it's good to just get on with it and start, because you can talk about starting a business for years and years and years and never get on with it. Yeah. But a business canvas is a great way to sort of say, right, what is my product? How am I going to sell it? How am I going to fund it? What are my marketing channels? And really kind of get a bird's eye view of what you need and when you need it. And then I guess to go from there is to start thinking about the product and how you're going to create it. And that's really kind of the first port of call. And then how are you going to sell it? Are you going to build a website and with an e-commerce platform? How are you going to pay for that? If you've got money, if you've got funding, do you need to create a Kickstarter to generate a bit of revenue to help get you going? So, I mean, money is often the big thing that stops people. Not everyone has the ability to sort of like generate capital, but I think there are so many ways in which you can raise, several £100, which can get you started. It can get you a simple website, and get you a domain name. So there's always, where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, for sure. So what I'm hearing in terms of marketing, then, a website is still really important nowadays.
Absolutely,
I know some businesses I've seen that they just rely on having a Facebook page and not an actual independent website. What's your thoughts on that?
It depends on what you're selling. I think if you're offering a service to people directly, I think sometimes a Facebook page is absolutely fine, because you can sell through a Facebook page. So say like you're a life coach or something like that, you can do everything through a Facebook page, and what you could do is you could redirect a URL to your Facebook page. So www.robbielockie.com, I could redirect that to my personal Facebook page and not worry about a website. But I think with a website, it just gives you more control over the kind of content that you want to create and put on there, and blogs and things like that. And also, you have a potential for a much bigger audience with a website. Well, obviously, with Facebook, it requires so much energy and effort to build up the audience, whereas a website, what you could do is you could market it in other ways, and using kind of natural search and stuff like that. If you started writing blogs and things, you could potentially attract hundreds of thousands of people fairly quickly if you set your website up in a way that was indexed well by Google. And yeah. So.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess you've got the option of people being able to opt into your own list as well, and then market.
Yeah, build your own audience. Yeah, via email MailChimp type list. Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Now, I noticed when I was doing some research on you that one of your previous clients says about you in their LinkedIn recommendations that you're the only creative they've ever met that's obsessed with organisation and structure. So tell us a little bit about that, the importance of that, and if there's any systems or tools that you can recommend to help vegan business owners run their operations more efficiently.
Absolutely. So what I've always found working with large groups of people, or even sort of anyone over like 4, is that humans are not naturally organized beings. We struggle with information overload. And when it comes to sort of managing tasks, it's very difficult to juggle everything. You've got your personal life, you've got your work life, and sometimes people tend to have everything coming into the same inbox. And I just think that is a major, major no-no. Don't have all your tasks and all your things coming into one inbox, because it's very hard to sort of like separate your personal messages and your personal content, your personal tasks with your work tasks. So as a business owner, make sure you have a separate inbox first and keep everything separate, all your tasks separate. Now, I use a platform called Asana, which is like a task and project management platform, and you can be very small and use it, and you can be very big and use it. It doesn't really matter the size of your business. And what it does is it really gets task management out of the inbox, out of the email box, because I think that what you want to do is you want to break your tasks down or your projects down as much as possible, and kind of break them up, and also split them out amongst the team, because often what happens in teams is that people can end up overlapping and doing the same work, and it can all become very, very confusing. And with things like Asana project management tool, also Basecamp is very, very similar. It allows you to sort of like take a big kind of project and break it up into lots of little chunks, and then those chunks can then be broken down into further chunks, and then you can sort of work your way through it and divvy out the kind of chunks to different parts of the team. And I think I've always seen projects get done much more quickly, much more efficiently in this way, through this type of thinking and working. And then there's things like Slack. Slack is a tool, it's a communication tool, that we use at PBN instead of email. I don't like the team or the contributors or the volunteers to email each other, or us to email each other, because I just think it's an inefficient way to communicate. Email really is for external communication, so from your business to people outside your organization. I've worked in companies where they actually have no internal email. Staff don't use email just because it wastes so much time. Whereas instant message, like Slack, it's an instant message. You send a message, if the person's there, they can answer you straight away. That time is instantly saved because you've communicated with them instantly. You can send messages, you can send video, it's searchable, and it's a quick kind of way of getting things done. Whereas email, you send it, you wait, you don't know whether the person's read or not, you know what I mean? So Slack is a great tool, and I really recommend it for any company, any business, whether you're 2 people, 10 people, or 100 people. Use that. Don't email each other.
Okay, that's some good tips. Excellent. Oh, fantastic. Now, one question, we're getting towards wrapping up now. One question I like to ask everyone as well is just about the use of the word vegan in their company's marketing materials, on their website and their branding, and how prominent or not it is. And we know there's the 2 different schools of thought, like one, it scares people off, and the other is no, it's popular now, so it's okay. I'm curious about what your thoughts on that are, and also why you called the new venture plant-based news as opposed to, say, something to do with vegan news.
Well, I think the thing is with that is that it's all to do with the way people perceive words. Vegan has a whole connotation attached to it, a whole kind of history. And as the vegan movement gets stronger, the more people that are kind of part of the movement, the kind of bigger it gets, and the more threatening it becomes to the wider populace. Class chose plant-based news, the word plant-based, just because it made it more open, made it more kind of accessible. It doesn't feel so scary. Not everyone wants to be a vegan, but a lot of people want to stop eating meat. A lot of people want to treat animals more kindly. They don't necessarily want to be associated with the vegan the vegan movement. Veganism is activism. You know, when you go into a supermarket and you consciously choose not to buy animal products, and you consciously choose to talk about it with your peers and your family, and you consciously choose to kind of like, you know, alienate yourself from society, that is a form of activism in a way. You're kind of standing up to an oppressive system. And I think plant-based just means, as it says, it's much more kind of the message, you know, what it says is on the tin, as it were, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah. No, for sure. No, that's good. No, I always love to hear, because everybody's got different views on that, so, and there's no right or wrong, so I just like to...
No, it really just depends on what you're selling. Like, a lot of people ask me, should we say vegan on our food business or our food products? And I often say to people, well, it's really depends on where you live and where you sell your product. I think in places where veganism isn't majorly popular, I'd advise you not to. I'd obviously say put vegan friendly or put small V's on things, but you know, market your product as you would market any other food product or company, and just say it's underpinned by vegan values, but don't shout about the vegan message, because it is off-putting and it doesn't attract people in. It'll attract the vegans in, but we're 1% of the population, so...
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a great answer. Now, before I ask you the final question about kind of where PBN is headed, I just wanted to very quickly go back to sharing the content, because I know you shared some great tips on how, you know, creating engaging content. You mentioned that you didn't really use much, if any, paid advertising on Facebook. So in that case, do you recommend, because obviously a lot of people are seeing a problem where they're sharing something organically and hardly anyone's liking or sharing their content, not necessarily because it's bad content, but simply because they haven't got, say, enough likes or followers, for example, for it to even be seen to by a decent number of organic likes. So would you say, like, do you recommend people building up the amount of likes and followers on their Facebook page? And if so, do you have any helpful strategies for doing that?
Paid advertising does work, but it really needs to be done only if you know what you're doing. Start using paid for advertising once you've read some books, done some video training, and learned how to target your ads, because you can't just sort of like waste thousands of pounds or dollars on doing paid advertising, and the right people are not seeing your content. So I think there is a place for it. It just all comes down to targeting correctly. Now, as far as building your audience, it really is about consistency. Posting every day. We try to post at least 3 to 5 times a day, and video content. If you can put a video up every single day on your Facebook page, then you should. Keep it very simple. You could have like update videos. You could have like video kind of meme type things where you just have kind of slideshows coming through talking about your products. So yeah, I think, and always think about your audience. What does your audience want to see? Because if you're, you know, selling knitwear, vegan knitwear, and then you're talking about like, I don't know, swimwear, it's not gonna work, because people are just not going to engage with that content. And don't be too broad. Don't sort of like share all kinds of different stuff. Like if you're like, we've got a vegan supermarket in London called Green Bay, and they've got a lot of great social media content, and they share a lot of stuff about food, because obviously they're a supermarket. Occasionally they do a bit of like activist type stuff, but they pretty much put all their energy into sharing things around food and vegan health and things like that, and all the content does really well. It gets a lot of likes and a lot of shares and things like that. So yeah. No,
that's good advice, because it's interesting, like, say, for example, with something like plant-based news, and I know you say you've got to target the right people, but it can be tricky kind of identifying who those right people are, because such a broad range of people would be interested in content, even if it's like food-related content. Do you see what I mean? It can be quite tricky with the actual deciding who shall I put this in front of, because it could
Absolutely.
be 40-year-old men or 20-year-old women could be, just as interested.
Yeah, it's really hard, and I think sometimes asking questions, my favorite thing to do really is to ask questions on social media. Ask a question to your audience, one line, simple, question mark, bam, and you will get so many responses. Human beings are very opinionated creatures. We love to answer questions, and I think, like, if you ask a question even just on its own without a graphic or an image, you will be amazed at how people respond. So if you ask your audience what they want to see, or did they enjoy this, or did they like that, or share me some pictures of what you ate last night, or whatever it is, people will throw content at you. People will throw answers at you. You would be amazed.
Free market research. Yeah, excellent.
Absolutely.
No, that's really great tips. That's brilliant. So tell me a bit about, then final question just to wrap up. What's your long-term vision for PBN and yourself?
So our long-term vision is to build a global audience for change. So that's kind of one of our kind of, lines of direction, really. So what we would like to do, one of my kind of like goals is to have 100,000 people from every continent. That's kind of, midterm kind of goal. And really with that is, we have an audience of, engaged people who will share content, who will fill out polls, who will share activist type content, who will share educational content. And, really the audience is not a passive kind of, entity. They are people who actively go out and talk about the vegan movement, who talk about vegan food, who talk about animal ethics, who talk about health, and they're kind of doing the work for us. And we're in a really unique space being a vegan business, because, whether we're selling a vegan food product or whether we are selling a vegan fashion brand, people love to talk about what we do. And I just find that if you market yourself well and you talk about yourself in a really kind of interesting and non kind of arrogant way, I think people really connect with you and will share your stuff for you. So I think that's the plan, really. Build a big audience, create amazing content, and sort of keep pushing the vegan message.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Robbie. You shared some really good insights and information.
My pleasure.
It's really great to be able to hear from someone, as I say, who's had, such a lot of success in a relatively short space of time for the amount of views and engagement that you're getting. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I think a lot of people listening will get some really great tips from there. And I'm looking forward to meeting you later in the year for the Vegan Trade Show, which I'm very excited about in London, which is
my
awesome.
First vegan trade show.
Yeah, I think it's everybody's which would be fantastic. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
So that was Robbie Lockie from Plant-Based News. You can find out more at plantbasednews.org. And that link is on the show notes page at veganbusinessmedia.com/podcasts and going to episode 79. Now for our Vegan Business News Roundup. Australia is set to get its first nationwide vegan restaurant franchise, reports the Gold Coast Bulletin. Natalie Evans, owner of Greenhouse Canteen and Bar at Miami, is opening her first franchise in September, that's 2017 if you're listening in the future, in Coolangatta, a suburb in the state of Queensland's Gold Coast. She describes the eatery as Viglam, her take on upmarket plant-based dining, and says it grew organically as the rise in healthy and plant-based eating grew in Australia. Evans, who's also opened Green Bathhouse, a spa and rejuvenation centre, plans to open her restaurant under a franchise model in every capital city across the country. Fabulous. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to the Sydney one arriving. And a franchise model is one way to get your brand out there in a big way, although as Evans says, it's imperative that franchisees have the same vision. A vegan burger startup in London, UK, raised more than £250,000 since it launched its crowdfunding campaign last week, reports Veg News. The Burger Company co-founders Rachel Hugh and Neil Potts launched their whole food-based burgers last summer at a London market. They continue to sell them at pop-ups and catering events, where they became so popular that in May 2017 alone, the company sold more than 1,100 burgers within just 35.5 hours of operation. Even US hot sauce brand Tabasco contracted the company to create a vegan burger for its summer barbecue campaign. The company's crowdfunding campaign on Crowdcube raised £300,000 in just a few days, way more than its £180,000 target. Hugh and Potts will use the funds for a lease on a permanent location and to cover the initial costs of a restaurant, which they plan to open in early 2018. Wow, this is great news. You may remember that I reported that All Plants plant-based food delivery service recently scored the largest investment in a vegan startup in Europe. And now this. It's fantastic to see the UK really getting behind plant-based eating. Finally, the global non-dairy cheese market is poised to reach $3.52 billion in 2023, according to research by Market Research Future. The report identifies lactose intolerance as the most significant factor driving the growth of this market, as well as rising numbers of vegans. Soy milk-based cheese is predicted to retain its dominance over non-dairy-based cheeses made from almond milk, coconut milk, rice milk, and others, with a market share of 54.3% by the end of 2017. Key players identified in the market are Canadian brand Daiya Foods, US companies Galaxy Nutritional Foods, Kite Hill Cheese, Tofuti Brands and Follow Your Heart, plus Greek brand Violife Foods and UK company Boot Island Foods. It's fantastic to see this sector continuing to grow. Vegan cheese has had its challenges over the years, and I've certainly tasted my fair share of bland, rubbery alternatives, particularly when I first went vegan in the mid-90s. But nowadays the options are far more enticing and delicious. Great news. So that's it for this episode of Vegan Business Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a review and rating on iTunes or any other platform you're listening on. Finally, I encourage you to head over to veganbusinessmedia.com, where you can find more resources, including details of my media and PR consultations, copywriting, editing and proofreading services to help you grow your vegan business. I'm Katrina Fox, author of Vegan Ventures, Start and Grow an Ethical Business, and I look forward to catching up with you in the next episode of Vegan Business Talk. Bye for now.